Before I tell you what happened on my wedding night, the night that has followed me for 51 years like a shadow that won't lie down even when the sun goes away, I want you to do 3 small things for me. Press that like button right now, before you get lost in what I'm about to say. Because where I come from, we believe a story is only worth telling if someone is willing to remember it. And that little thumbs up is your way of telling me you'll remember mine. Then hit subscribe, because I have more stories like this one. Stories my community would rather I kept behind the barn door. And I aim to keep telling them as long as my hands can still hold this recorder. And last, I want you to leave me a comment and tell me where in this wide world you are watching from. I have never left the county I was born in, not once in 73 years. So when I read those comments later, with my granddaughter helping me sound out the town names, it is the closest thing to travel this old woman will ever know. Now, sit with me. Pour yourself something warm. Because what my husband did on the night we became man and wife was not what any young bride expects. And it took me the better part of my life to understand whether I should have run from it, or whether it was the truest act of love I would ever receive. My name does not matter for this telling, so you may call me what my grandchildren call me, which is Memmy. I was raised in a small Amish settlement, the kind you cannot find easily on a map, tucked between cornfields and a creek that froze solid every January. My mother bore 9 children and I was the 5th, which meant I was neither old enough to be treated as a woman grown, nor young enough to be coddled as a baby. I grew up the way most of our girls grew up, learning to bake bread before I learned to read a full sentence, learning to can vegetables before I understood much of anything about the world beyond our fences. We did not have television. We did not have the telephone in our homes. What we had was work, and faith, and each other, and for most of my childhood, that felt like more than enough. I tell you all this because you need to understand the world I came from before you can understand what happened to me at 19 years old, when my father sat me down at the kitchen table on a Tuesday evening in autumn and told me I was to be married. I want to be honest with you here, because I have decided at my age that honesty is the only currency worth spending. Arranged marriages, in the way outsiders imagine them, are not exactly how it worked in our community. We were not forced at gunpoint nor sold like cattle. But there was a strong hand of guidance from our elders, from our parents, and a young woman who wished to remain in good standing with her family and her church did not often say no when a match was proposed to her. My father had been in discussion, quietly, for several months, with a bishop from a settlement 2 counties over, a stricter order than ours, one that did not permit courting the way even we modestly did. In that community, a young man and woman might be introduced, might exchange a handful of supervised visits, or in some cases, might not meet at all before the wedding was arranged between the families. My case was the second kind. His name was Eli. That is all I knew of him for the first 18 years of my life. A name spoken once at that kitchen table, along with the information that he was 26 years old, a widower, and that his first wife had died 2 winters before from a fever that took her quickly. In the space of 4 days, before the local healer or the English doctor could do much of anything for her. I was told he had land. I was told he had a good name in his church. I was told he needed a wife, and that my father believed I would make a fine one. I did not argue. I want you to understand that this was not because I was without will or without feeling. It was because in my world, at that time, a young woman's worth was measured partly in her willingness to trust that her parents, who loved her, who had raised her in the fear of God, would not hand her over to cruelty. I trusted my father. I trusted, too, that whatever fear lived in my chest on that Tuesday evening was a fear every bride before me had likely carried. And that fear alone was not reason enough to refuse a life that had been laid out for me with care. Still, I will tell you, my hands shook so badly that night that I dropped a plate while washing dishes, and it shattered against the floor stones, and I sat down right there among the pieces, and I wept until my mother came and held me the way she had not held me since I was a very small girl. The weeks between that conversation and the wedding day moved both too quickly and too slowly, the way I imagine time moves for a woman standing at the edge of a cliff, watching the tide come in below her. I sewed my wedding dress myself, a deep blue the color of an evening sky just after the sun has gone, but before the stars have fully come out. I helped my mother and my aunts prepare the food that would feed nearly 300 guests. For our weddings are not small, quiet things. They are the whole community gathered. Tables groaning with roast chicken and creamed celery and pies stacked higher than a child's head. I did all of this with my hands busy and my mind far away, turning over and over the single fact I could not escape, that in a matter of weeks, I would stand across from a stranger, a man I had never laid eyes on, never heard speak a single word, and I would promise him my whole life. I did not see Eli until the morning of our wedding. I remember every detail of that moment the way you remember the moment before an accident. The strange slowness of it, the way your senses sharpen even as your mind refuses to believe what is happening. I was standing near the barn where the ceremony tables had been arranged, my mother fussing with the pins in my hair, when a wagon came up the lane and a man climbed down from it, tall, broad through the shoulders the way farm work makes a man broad, with a beard that told me nothing because every married man wore one, and eyes that found mine across that yard and held there for one long moment before he looked away, as was proper, as was expected. That was it. That was our entire meeting before the vows. One look, across a farmyard, on the morning we were to be bound together until death separated us. The ceremony itself lasted nearly 3 hours, as our weddings do, full of hymns sung slow and unaccompanied. The notes stretched out like taffy, full of sermons from not one but 2 ministers, reminding us of the weight of what we were undertaking. I stood beside Eli for the whole of it, close enough to smell the soap on his skin, close enough to hear him breathing, and yet he remained, in every way that mattered, a complete stranger to me. When at last the bishop asked if I would take this man, I said yes in a voice so quiet I am not certain anyone but God, and my own trembling heart heard it. We ate. We received our guests. The tables were cleared as the afternoon wore into evening, and one by one the buggies pulled away down the lane, until it was only Eli's family and my family, and then, finally, only the 2 of us, standing in the farmhouse that was now to be my home, that I had walked through for the very first time only hours before. I want to tell you now what I told no one. Not my mother, not my sisters, not even my own daughters until they were grown women themselves, with husbands of their own. I want to tell you what happened that night, because I believe, after all these years turning it over like a stone in my pocket, that it is not a story of horror. Though for many years I told it to myself as one. It is something else, something I am still, even now, not entirely certain I have the words for. But I will try. When the last buggy had gone and the house had gone quiet, Eli did not come to me right away. I sat in the front room, my hands folded in my lap, my wedding dress still on, waiting the way I had been taught a wife waits, and I listened to him moving about the house, the creak of the stairs, A door opening and closing somewhere above me. Footsteps crossing the floor over my head. Back and forth, for what felt like a very long time. I did not know this man. I did not know if that pacing meant he was preparing himself with the same terror I carried, or if it meant something darker, something I had no framework to understand. My mother had told me only the barest facts of what a wedding night entailed, spoken in a hushed voice 2 days before, her eyes not quite meeting mine. I sat in that front room and I prayed, the way I had been taught to pray, though I confess the words felt thin against the size of my fear. When Eli finally came down the stairs, he was not undressed for bed as I had braced myself for. He was carrying something in his arms, wrapped in a quilt, and for one terrible, dizzying second, in the low lamplight, I thought it was a body. I nearly screamed. I want you to understand the state of my mind in that moment. 19 years old, alone in a strange house with a man I had exchanged not one word with, watching him descend the stairs, cradling something the size and shape of a small, still child. It was not a child. He set the bundle down on the table between us and unwrapped it slowly, and inside was a wedding dress. Not mine, his first wife's, the one she had worn and sewn herself 2 years before. The same shade of blue mine was, because in our community the color does not vary much from bride to bride. He laid it out flat on the table, smoothing the fabric with hands that I would come to know, over the following years, as gentle in nearly everything they touched. And then he sat down across from me, and for the first time since the ceremony, he spoke. He told me her name was Rachel. He told me they had been married 4 years before the fever took her. He told me that in those 4 years, they had tried and failed to have a child 3 times, each time losing the baby before it could draw breath, and that Rachel had died believing herself somehow to blame for it. A belief he had never been able to talk her out of, not in 4 years of trying. He told me that on the morning of the day she died, burning with fever, barely able to speak, she had made him promise her one thing. She made him promise that whoever he married next, because she knew, she told him plainly, that a man like him, with land and a farm to run, could not stay a widower forever. Not in our community. Not with the practical demands of the life we live. Whoever he married next, he was to tell her about Rachel on their very first night together. He was to say her name out loud in that house. He was to lay out her dress and remember her in front of his new wife, so that Rachel would not become a secret buried in the walls, a ghost he was ashamed of, a woman erased simply because a new woman had come to take her place at the table and in the bed and in the rhythm of the days. He told me he had turned this promise over every day since her death, terrified of how a new bride would receive it, terrified that any woman he married would hear this and believe she was marrying a man who could not let go of the dead, a man who would always compare her, always find her wanting against a memory grown soft and golden with grief. That was what haunted me for years afterward. Not fear of him, not any cruelty. What haunted me was the sheer weight of what he had handed me on the first night of our marriage. The responsibility of holding another woman's memory, a woman I would never meet, in my own 2 hands, forever. I did not know, sitting at that table at 19 years old in my wedding dress, whether I had married a man, or whether I had married a grief so large it would swallow whatever life we tried to build together. I did not sleep at all that first night. I lay awake beside a husband I barely knew, in a bed that had held another woman before me, staring at the ceiling, replaying his words, Rachel's name echoing in my skull like a bell that would not stop ringing. I thought, more than once, that I had made a terrible mistake, that I had married into a house of mourning that would never fully become a house of living. But I want to tell you what I came to understand, slowly, over the months and then the years that followed, because I think it matters more than the fear I felt that first night. Eli did not speak of Rachel often after that. He did not need to. He had done, on our wedding night, the one thing he believed a good man owed both to the wife he had lost and to the wife he had just gained. He had told the truth, all of it, at once, so that no shadow of secrecy could grow between us later. He gave me the heaviest thing he had to give on the very first night, not because he wished to burden me, but because he trusted me enough, sight unseen, stranger that I was to him, to carry it honestly. He did not want a marriage built on a lie of omission. He did not want me discovering Rachel's existence in scraps and whispers from his mother, from neighbors, the way so many second wives in our community did, piecing together a dead woman's shape from the corners of a house that still bore her fingerprints. He wanted me to know fully, from the very first hour, exactly what I was stepping into, so that everything after, every kindness, every quiet evening, every child we would eventually raise together, would be built on solid ground rather than sand. It took me years to understand this as an act of love rather than an act of horror. I will not pretend to you that understanding came easily or quickly. There were nights, in the first year of our marriage, when I would catch him staring out the window toward the small family plot at the edge of our land, where Rachel was buried, and something cold and jealous would twist in my chest, and I would wonder if I was only ever a placeholder. A body to run his household and bear his children, while his heart remained buried in the ground with a woman I had never met. But Eli was patient with me in a way I did not expect from a man raised in a stricter order than my own. He never once compared me to her, not in temperament, not in cooking, not in anything at all. When I bore our first child, a daughter, 2 years into our marriage, he wept, actual tears, which I had not seen from him even on our wedding night. And he told me, holding that baby against his chest, that he had believed for a long time God did not intend for him to have living children, that Rachel's losses had convinced him the fault lay somewhere in him, and that watching me hold our healthy, screaming daughter was the first morning in 4 years he had woken up without the weight of that particular fear sitting on his chest. We went on to have 6 children together. 5 of them lived to adulthood, and I will not dwell long on the one we lost, because that is a different story for a different night, and grief, I have learned, does not always need an audience to be honored. But I will tell you that when we buried that child, our third, a little boy who lived only 11 days, Eli held me the way I imagine he must have wished someone had held him after each of Rachel's losses, and he said to me, through his own tears, that he finally understood what those 4 years with her had cost him, that he had never truly grieved them because there had been no one beside him steady enough to grieve with. I was that person for him, and in the years after, I came to see that he had been preparing to be that person for me from the very first night, by refusing to hide his grief from me, by teaching me in the hardest way possible that love in a marriage is not the absence of pain, but the willingness to carry it together, openly, without shame. We were married for 46 years before Eli passed, 3 winters ago now, of a heart that simply gave out one morning while he was hitching the horses. I found him in the stable, and I sat with him there for the better part of an hour before I could bring myself to walk to the phone shed and call for help that I already knew would come too late. I will not tell you that losing him did not break something in me, because it did. And I do not believe that particular break will ever fully mend, not on this side of heaven. But I want to tell you what I understood, sitting in that stable with my husband of 46 years, that I had not fully understood on the night of our wedding. Terrified and 19 and certain I had married into a haunted house, I understood that what haunted me all those years ago was never Eli, and never even Rachel, not truly. What haunted me was the shape of a love I did not yet have the wisdom to recognize, a love so committed to honesty that it was willing to risk frightening a new bride, rather than build a life on a foundation of hidden grief. Eli gave me, on our wedding night, the truest gift a person raised in silence and duty and unspoken sorrow can give another. He gave me the whole truth of himself, unpolished and painful, before I had even decided whether I could love him. And because he trusted me with that truth so early, I was able to build a real marriage with him, not a performance of one. Not a polite arrangement papered over with pretending. We were strangers on our wedding morning, yes. But by the time he died in that stable with the horses shifting nervously around us, we were about as close to one soul in two bodies as I believe two people are permitted to become in this life. Let me go back for a moment, because there is more to this story than the single night I have described, and I think the years that followed deserve their own telling, if you will indulge an old woman a little longer. The first months of our marriage were, if I am honest with you, some of the strangest of my whole life. I had grown up in a house full of noise, full of siblings underfoot, full of my mother's voice calling from one room to another. Eli's farmhouse, by contrast, felt to me like a held breath. He was not an unkind man, not even in those early days, but he was a quiet one. A man who had learned, I think, in the 4 years of his first marriage and the 2 years of grief that followed it, to keep most of what he carried folded up small inside himself. I would move about that kitchen learning where things were kept, learning his habits, the way he liked his coffee, the hour he rose to tend the animals, and all the while I felt Rachel's presence in that house the way you feel a draft under a door you cannot quite locate. Her handwriting was still in the recipe book tucked in the kitchen drawer. Her stitching was still in a quilt folded at the foot of our bed, one Eli could not bring himself to remove, and one I did not ask him to. Her preserves, put up the summer before she died, still lined a shelf in the cellar, and I remember standing before those jars more than once, staring at her tidy handwriting on the labels, feeling something I did not have a proper word for at the time. Though now I would call it a strange, aching kinship with a woman I had never met. I want to tell you about the day, perhaps 4 months into our marriage, when I finally worked up the courage to ask Eli more about her. We were shelling peas on the back porch, the kind of quiet, ordinary task that somehow makes hard conversations easier. And I asked him, without quite looking at him, what Rachel had been like. I remember he did not answer right away. He kept shelling peas for a long moment, and I thought perhaps I had overstepped, that I had pressed against a wound still too raw to touch. But then he began to speak, slowly at first, and told me she had been a small woman, smaller than me, with a laugh he described as sounding like a creek running over stones, quick and bright and constant. He told me she had been terrified of thunderstorms in a way that never left her, even as a grown woman, and that he used to sit with her in the cellar during summer storms, holding her hand, singing hymns low under his breath until the thunder passed. He told me she had wanted, more than almost anything, to be a mother, and that her losses had hollowed something out of her that he had watched happen and had been powerless to stop, no matter how he tried to comfort her. I remember crying, quietly as he spoke, Not out of jealousy, not any longer, but out of a grief that was not even mine to carry. Grief for a woman who had wanted so badly to hold a living child and never had the chance. And I remember Eli reaching over, setting down the pea pods, and taking my hand in his for the first time since our wedding day, and telling me that he was grateful, truly grateful, that I had asked. He said that carrying her memory alone, in silence, had felt at times like carrying a stone in his chest, and that sharing it with me, watching me grieve alongside him for a woman I had never known, had lightened something in him he had not expected to feel lightened. That was the moment, if I am honest, when I began to fall in love with my husband. Not the wedding day. Not even the wedding night, frightening and strange as it was. It was that afternoon on the porch, shelling peas, when I understood that Eli was not a man haunted by his past in a way that would keep me forever locked outside of his heart. He was a man determined to make room for both women in that heart at once, and he trusted me enough to help him do it. Our life together, in the years that followed, took on the shape that most Amish marriages do, full of work, full of seasons turning over one into the next, full of small joys stitched together with hardship. I learned to run that household the way Rachel once had, though I made it my own in time, rearranging the kitchen to suit my hands rather than hers, adding my own recipes to that worn book in the drawer, my own handwriting slowly filling its blank pages alongside hers. I did not erase her. I simply grew alongside the space she had left, the way a new planting grows up around an old fence post, until eventually you could not quite say where one ended and the other began. Our community, I should tell you, did not entirely understand what Eli had done on our wedding night. Once word of it slowly made its way around, as everything eventually does in a small settlement. Some of the older women clicked their tongues and said it was improper, that a man ought to leave the dead in the ground and not drag them into a new marriage bed on the very first night. My own mother, when I finally told her the story some years later, wept and held my hands and told me she wished she had known, that she might have prepared me better. Though I do not know now what preparation could have made that night less strange, but there were others. Quieter women. Women who had themselves become second wives to widowers, who took me aside at quiltings and canning bees over the years and told me, in hushed voices, that they wished their own husbands had been half so honest with them, that they had spent years piecing together their husbands' first marriages from scraps and silences and half-finished sentences, always wondering, always guessing, never quite certain where they stood in comparison to a woman who could no longer speak for herself. Those women told me I was fortunate, and though it took me a long while to believe them, I came eventually to agree. I think often now of how differently my life might have unfolded had Eli chosen silence instead of honesty on that first night. Had he simply climbed into bed beside me as a stranger and said nothing of Rachel at all, I might have spent years discovering her in pieces. A name overheard at a funeral, a dress found folded in a trunk, a look that passed between Eli and his mother that I could not quite interpret. I might have grown suspicious, resentful, forever measuring myself against a shadow I could not see clearly enough to either compete with or forgive. Instead, because he handed me the whole truth in one difficult evening, I was able to grieve Rachel honestly, alongside him, and then set that grief down, gently, and build something new that did not require her erasure to survive. There is a lesson in this, I think, that reaches beyond marriage, beyond even our small Amish world, though I have only ever known that world well enough to speak from it. It is this: The truths we are most afraid to hand to the people we love are very often the truths that, once shared honestly, become the strongest foundation for whatever comes next. It is the secrets kept, the truths withheld out of fear or shame or misplaced kindness, that tend to rot a thing slowly from the inside. The way a beam left untreated will rot quietly within a barn wall until the whole structure gives way without warning. Eli understood this, I believe, more instinctively than most men his age, perhaps because his own grief had taught him how dangerous silence could be, how it had nearly hollowed Rachel out entirely in her final years, convinced as she was that her losses were a shame to be hidden rather than a sorrow to be shared. I raised our children with this same conviction, as best I could. I taught my daughters, when their own turns came to be courted and eventually married, that a marriage built on comfortable silences and polite omissions is a fragile thing, no matter how peaceful it may look from the outside. I taught them that real love is not the absence of difficult truths, but the courage to speak them plainly, and the grace to receive them without flinching away. I do not know that all of them have carried this lesson as fully as I hoped, for children make their own way in the end, as they must. But I have watched at least 2 of my daughters choose husbands who reminded me, in small ways, of Eli. Steady men, quiet men, but men unwilling to build a life on things left unsaid. I still think of Rachel sometimes. I visit her small stone at the edge of the property when I am able to walk that far, and I tell her quietly, the way I imagine she would want to hear it, about her husband's life after her, about the children he raised, about the man he became in the decades she did not get to share with him. I do not think of her as a rival any longer, and have not for many, many years. I think of her as the first thread in a story that became, eventually, mine to help finish. If you are young, and you are watching this, and somewhere in your own life a person you love has handed you a truth too heavy to carry easily, I want to tell you what 51 years have taught this old woman. That heaviness is not always a warning to run. Sometimes, it is the truest kind of invitation a person can offer you. An invitation to build something honest, together, out of whatever pieces life has left you both holding. I have told you the whole of it now, or as much of it as an old woman's memory and an old woman's tongue can manage in one sitting. If this story moved something in you, I would be grateful. Truly grateful if you would let me know it. Press that like button before you scroll away, so that this story finds its way to someone else who might need to hear it tonight. Subscribe if you have not already, because I have a good many more evenings like this one left in me, and a good many more stories I have been saving up my whole life to finally tell. And please, before you go, leave me a comment and tell this old woman where in the world you are joining me from tonight. I will read every single one, with my granddaughter sitting beside me, sounding out the places I will never get to see with my own eyes. And I promise you, it will mean more to me than you know. Until the next time we sit together like this, may you carry whatever heavy truths you've been given with as much grace as you can find. And may you be brave enough, when your own turn comes, to hand your truths honestly to whoever is willing to hold them. There is one more piece of this story I have not yet told you, and I find, now that I am nearing the end of my telling, that I do not want to leave it out, because I think it is perhaps the piece that matters most. When Eli and I had been married almost 20 years, his mother, an old woman by then herself, fell ill one winter, and I spent many weeks at her bedside, helping to nurse her through what we all believed, correctly as it turned out, would be her final illness. In those long, quiet hours beside her bed, She told me things about her son I had never known. Things even Eli himself had perhaps forgotten about his own childhood. She told me that as a boy, Eli had been the kind of child who could not bear to see anything broken and left unmended. A fence post, a bird with an injured wing, a friendship gone sour between two of his brothers. She said he would work at a problem, quietly and stubbornly, until he found some way to set it right, even if the mending took him far longer than anyone else would have had the patience for. She told me, too, that when Rachel died, she had feared for her son in a way she had never feared for any of her other children. She said she watched him for those 2 years of widowhood grow smaller somehow, quieter, a man folding in on himself the way a leaf curls inward before it finally drops from the branch. She had worried, she confessed to me, lying frail in that bed, that he might never marry again, might spend the whole of his remaining life alone with his grief, tending his farm and his sorrow in equal measure, until both of them, farm and man together, simply wore away to nothing. And then she took my hand, her grip surprising in its strength for a woman so near death, and she told me that whatever fear I had carried into that marriage, whatever confusion or hurt I had felt on our wedding night learning of Rachel in the way I had, I ought to know that her son had chosen, deliberately and with great care, to hand me his grief honestly, rather than hide it from me, precisely because he could not bear the thought of another marriage, built the way so many second marriages in our community were built, on silence, on comparison, on a dead woman's ghost allowed to haunt a house from the shadows, because no one would speak her name aloud. She told me that in mending himself enough to marry again, he had also been trying, in his own quiet way, to mend the loneliness he saw coming for me too. A young bride handed to a stranger, with no warning and no say in the matter. He could not give me back the choice that had been taken from me in that arrangement between our fathers, but he could give me the truth, all of it, right from the start, so that at least I would not spend my marriage discovering my husband's heart one hidden corner at a time. I sat with his mother until she passed a few weeks later, and I carried what she told me with me for the rest of my own marriage. Understanding Eli a little more fully for it, I began to see, looking back over the years we had already shared by then, all the small ways that same instinct of his had shaped our life together. He was never a man who let a disagreement between us fester unspoken. If something sat wrong between us, he would raise it, awkwardly sometimes, clumsily even, but he would raise it, rather than let it grow silent and rotten the way I had seen happen in other marriages around us. Marriages where husband and wife moved through decades side by side without ever truly speaking to one another about the things that mattered most. When our children struggled, and children do struggle, no matter how carefully you raise them, no matter how much faith and discipline and love you pour into their upbringing, Eli insisted always that we speak of it honestly between ourselves, and often with the children themselves, rather than pretend, as was common in stricter households, that difficulty was something to be endured in silence and never named aloud. I think of this now, in my old age, sitting alone in the house we shared for so many years, and I understand that the frightening night of our wedding was not an aberration in the man I married, but rather the truest possible introduction to him. He showed me, in the space of a single evening, exactly the kind of husband he intended to be, a man who would rather risk a difficult truth than protect a comfortable lie, a man who believed that love without honesty was merely a kind of politeness dressed up to look like devotion. I do not know what became of the fear I carried in my chest as a 19-year-old bride, sitting across the table from a wrapped bundle I believed for one terrible moment might be a body. I suppose it transformed, slowly, the way most fears do when we are fortunate enough to outlive them, into something closer to gratitude. I am grateful now for a husband who trusted me enough to hand me his grief before he had any evidence I could be trusted to hold it gently. I am grateful for a marriage that began in fear and uncertainty and somehow, through years of patient honesty, grew into the deepest peace I have known in this life. And I am grateful, even now, sitting here with my memories and my recorder and my granddaughter, waiting patiently in the next room to help me read your comments later, that I have lived long enough to understand a story that frightened me for so many years as what it truly was, all along. Not a haunting, but a homecoming, arriving in a shape I was not prepared to recognize on the night it first appeared. Good night, friends. Thank you for sitting with an old woman and her memories a little while longer.